Hey everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining me. My name is Dennis Brown, and this is my weekly Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. Monday at noon, I do these live trainings, and today I'm going to share with you some big mistakes that I made that ultimately ended up costing me millions of dollars in my pocket. Okay, so I'm going to share with you those mistakes. We're going to talk about that. So here's the agenda. First of all, as you come in, hit me up in the comments with the city and state you're logging in from. I'd love to hear from you. If you're catching this on replay anytime after noon on Mondays, hit me up with hashtag replay. I love to hear from my replay folks. Again, city and state. I'm going to do some shout outs to people that check in. Then we're going to do the training. I'm going to share with you those huge, monstrous, very costly mistakes that I've made. And then we're going to do live Q&A at the end if you stick around. Okay, so that's the agenda. That's what we're going to do. We're going to let some people get live. Let's do some shout outs and we'll go from there. Scott from Plymouth Meeting, PA. Welcome, Scott. Ember from Houston, Texas. Andrea from South Texas. Got people from Texas coming in. John Heller from Johnstown, PA. Betty Jones from Wilson, North Carolina. Andre, welcome. William from Ilion, New York. Brian from Independence, Oregon. Oh, and we got Andrea from Rio Grande City, Texas. Ricky Aguilar, as always, from Texas. Victor from Bronx. So you can see we got people from all over the place. Usually we'll have somebody chime in from overseas or Canada or Europe or who knows, even Africa, South America sometimes. So ultimately, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about some of the biggest mistakes that I've made that ultimately ended up costing me a ton of money in my pocket. So the reason why I'm going to share these with you is because I don't want you to make these same mistakes. All right. So before we get started, I know we're doing some shout outs, but before we get started, do me a favor. I want to take a quick poll of where we're at. Okay. I think there's quite a few people live now. Quick poll where we're at. Who in this group is struggling with getting shippers? Who's struggling with freight broker sales and getting shipping clients? Hit me up in the comments and say, I am. Okay. Hit me up in the comments with I am, because I think I have some good news for you. All right, but let's see who's struggling with that first. If there's nobody in the group, great. Then we'll just move on. If there is, then I definitely I think I can help. So Cynthia is, William is. It's very common, just so you guys know. You're in a safe place here. You know, this is a very safe community, so it's okay to be vulnerable. Trust me, I've been there. I've been in your shoes. Cool. All right, good. Yep. Okay. Got it. All right. So here's the good news. Okay. So even if you're waiting on pending authority, if you're not comfortable with freight broker sales, if you don't have any sales experience, here's the good news. What I want you guys to understand, let me just try to pull this up really quick. This is kind of a unique opportunity just because of timing. I just opened enrollment for my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator program. Okay. So I just opened enrollment for my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator program. That program, some of you people that are in this group have been a part of this program. That program is an 8-week live freight broker sales coaching program where I coach you live. I teach you and I help you to implement my freight broker sales system that allowed me to do over $200 million as a freight broker. We've put over 1,000 students through this program. We've had a lot of great success stories. Again, if you go to that link right now, you can check out the details. And if you're serious, this is not a free program. If you're serious and you're not a tire kicker, you can schedule a call with me to do an interview where I can see if you're a good fit for the program and if I'm a good fit for you. There are not a lot of spots left, but there are a few spots left. So I wanted to open it up here to my faithful Monday community here because it's going to be sold out very soon. But if you are serious about building a 7-figure freight brokerage, the reason why I put this program together is because most people struggle with getting shippers out of the gate. So this program was designed to teach you how to get 2 to 4 new shippers per month and on your way to 7 figures. Okay. So that's that. Open up that link, save that link, take a picture of that link, do whatever you got to do. but all of the call slots are filling up very quick and there's just not a lot of spots available. So if you want to have a conversation about that and you're serious, okay? Again, I don't want any tire kickers. If you're serious, go ahead, check out that link, and maybe we'll get an opportunity to work together in the Freight Broker Sales Accelerator coaching program, okay? It's a coaching and mentoring program I've had for several years. And again, we've had some amazing success stories come out of it. Some of my top students that have come out of that program are now doing 2 or 3 million a month, okay, as brokers or agents. So hope that helps. All right, cool. All right, so a couple more check-ins and then we'll get the ball rolling. Eclectic Rose from Colorado. Shane recommends the Sales Accelerator. Thank you, Shane. Appreciate the kind words. Scott, I did notice that you do have a call scheduled later today, so I look forward to talking to you. Okay, good. Cool. All right, awesome. All right, well, let's jump in. Let me review my notes really quick. And we'll dive right in. Okay. Give me 1 second, guys. We're gonna get the show on the road here in just 1 minute. Sorry. You can see I got a lot of notes here, okay? So it's detailed. There's not a lot of different topics, but it is very detailed because I wanted to make sure that I kind of broke this down for you guys. All right, so today, I'm going to share with you 3 huge mistakes that I made that ultimately cost me over $5 million out of my HIP National Bank. $5 million. It cost me these 3 mistakes. So lean in, take some notes, pay attention. If that doesn't interest you, then feel free to click away. But these are 3 huge mistakes. Many of them I've never even spoken about before. Okay. So I'm going to share with you these 3 mistakes. And what you have to understand is this: it's okay to make mistakes. It's totally normal to make mistakes. Particularly as a new entrepreneur or as a startup, mistakes happen. We have to learn from those mistakes. I fortunately learned from those mistakes. If I hadn't learned from those mistakes, I probably would have lost 20 million. But I did learn from those mistakes along the way, and so can you. And that's the reason why I'm sharing this with you today, because I want you to learn from my mistakes. I'm more than willing to be open and transparent and admit where I've made some big mistakes. And so, yeah, if you're looking to grow a successful freight brokerage, or you're looking to start a freight broker or freight agent program, you definitely want to lean in, because these are things that can save you a ton of time, a ton of frustration, and a ton of money. So here are my notes. Let's jump into these really, really quick. And these are not going to be intuitive. These are things that you may not think of, and very few people talk about as it relates to their freight broker startup journey. Okay, cool. Number 1 is hiring the wrong people. All right. So every entrepreneur in every industry that's ever hired anybody understands how difficult it can be to hire the right people, because there are a lot of people out there raising their hand and telling you how great they are. And there's this old adage, the best actor gets the job. So it's hard to filter through who's right and wrong. So you're never going to hit the bullseye 100% when it comes to hiring. Okay. But hiring the wrong people into key roles like sales and, management and, management positions, right? Those types of hires can be very costly. There are studies out there that say if you hire, say, a mid-level manager for $60,000 or $70,000 a year, and then they turn over, the cost of replacing them is $60,000 to $70,000. So it can be very, very expensive to replace a key hire if you hire wrong. So you've got the direct replacement cost. Secondly, you've got lost productivity. Let's say, for example, you hire a salesperson and you put them on a base and some sort of commission structure. And you're monitoring their growth and they're kind of up and down. And let's say it takes you 5 or 6 months to figure out they're not a good fit. Or maybe they find out that they're not a good fit and they self-select out. Either way, you let them go or they leave. Now you've got 5 months of lost productivity, and now you have to replace that person. Beyond that, you've also got the loss in morale, right? the people around them, their colleagues, their friends, the people that were hired with them, their managers, the rest of the team start seeing a lot of turnover by hiring the wrong people, and that kills morale. That'll kill your culture, right? So hiring the wrong person can be very, very expensive, okay? And I've done all the wrong things many, many times before, right? But I can tell you that what you want to focus in on is you want to focus in on people that have proven track record of being excellent in their field. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be, they don't necessarily have to be experienced freight brokers. They don't necessarily have to be experienced in logistics. But if you're hiring somebody into a managerial role, you want them to have significant proven experience. If you're hiring somebody into a sales role, right, and they're going to be maybe a key role in sales, you got to know what you're getting. If you're hiring somebody for frontline, then they're probably not going to have a lot of experience. But if you're hiring somebody for a little bit higher end, national accounts or otherwise, you want to hire somebody who has a proven track record of success. Okay. So hiring is one of those mistakes that has cost me, I don't know, it would be hard to tabulate, but it's definitely into the 7 figures when it comes to making hiring mistakes. Okay. So that's number 1. Number 2, focusing too much on new customers, on getting new customers, and not enough time on customer development and retention. Okay. The concept that it's cheaper to retain a client than it is to get a new client is 100% true. But most people, including myself, have over-optimized their business to acquire new customers and not spend enough time focusing on customer development and retention. Because ultimately, let's think about it this way. If you get a new customer and they give you a load and you move that load and you make a couple $100 on that load, you've only made a couple $100. If you don't retain that client and get the repeat business, well, then the lifetime value of that client was only a couple $100 in profit. But if you get that customer, you spend, say, days or weeks or even months trying to acquire that customer, and you spend all that time, and then you move the first load in week 1, and then in week 2, you develop that, enhance that trust in that relationship, and then in week 2, you move 4 loads, and then in month 3, you're moving 10 loads, and by month 6, you're moving 5 loads a week. So that development has now increased what we call the lifetime value of that shipper. So the real trick in this business and in most businesses is not the front end sale. Of course, you have to get that client in the door, but the real trick to the business is retention. And that requires you to be very conscious about that. So there's a couple things. I'm going to give you a couple of tips here on customer development and retention. I can't dive into that real deep right here, but ultimately I'm going to give you a couple tips. Couple tips are this, okay? Number 1, one of the things that I made the mistake and we should have done more of is we should have had more face time with our clients. What do I mean by that? Whenever possible, whenever economically feasible, you want to reinvest some of those profits back into the relationship and actually visit your clients face to face. I know it's hard to believe, but most freight brokers don't do this. Most freight agents don't do this unless they're in their local market. And even then, sometimes they don't do it. But no matter where they are, your goal should be at least once a year with your book of business. You should be out there, breaking bread, talking to your clients, having conversations with them, understanding what's going on inside their business face to face, not just over the phone. So you want to develop those types of relationships where you have a face-to-face relationship. Those types of relationships are much stronger than just email, text, and phone, right? It's just you build rapport quicker, and understand it's a great way for you to differentiate yourself. So one of the keys here, again, in customer development and retention is putting a face to the name and meeting them and going and visiting them as often as economically possible. That's one of the tips. The other one is a really important one, and that is you want to develop multiple relationships within the organization. So rather than just having one point of contact that is tendering the loads and you really don't know anybody else in the organization, what you want to do is you want to try to develop relationships with people in that organization at multiple levels. You've got the frontline, maybe people that are tendering the loads. You've got kind of the managers slightly above them, maybe the shipping manager or the warehouse manager. And then you got maybe a director level or VP level above them. Your goal should be to develop 3 relationships at 3 different levels within that organization. Now, why is that? Well, the fact is people turn over, right? If you've got a client that's doing $250,000 a year with you, and then you've only got 1 point of contact and that person gets fired or quits or passes away, all of a sudden, now your entire opportunity is up in arms and it has the potential of losing it because you lost that one relationship. And I've lost clients because of that. Most brokers who have been in business long enough will tell you the same story. But the reality is, if you have multiple layers of relationships within that organization, the ability for you to survive that event, that turnover event, for whatever reason it is exponentially higher. Okay, so that's my tip for number 2, which is focusing on new customers versus customer development and retention. Now, don't get me wrong, you have to focus on new customers, but you have to balance new customer acquisition and customer development and retention. Okay, and number 3, I saved this for last because this is by far one of the biggest mistakes that I ever made in setting up my freight brokerage, as well as other businesses that I've been involved with in the past, is taking on outside investors. Okay, so taking on outside investors is typically not needed for a freight brokerage or freight agency. Most freight brokerage can be bootstrapped. It doesn't take an enormous amount of capital in order to cash flow that business, because you can either have an established credit line, or even more often, you can work with factoring companies to help finance your receivables. And again, if you don't know what a factoring company is, it's basically specialized financing that allows you to pay your carriers before you get paid by your shippers, okay? So it doesn't really require you to take on outside investment. And let me explain to you the downside of taking on an outside investor. Let's say you want to start a freight brokerage and you don't have a ton of money, but the reality is you've got a friend who's been successful, or a colleague or a business connection who's been successful. And you say, listen, if you invest $100,000 into my startup, I'll give you 50% of my business. This is just a hypothetical, okay? Now, today, when he's giving you that investment, that company's probably worth 0 if it's a true startup. But now you exchange for 100,000, you give them 50% of your company. Now they're an outside investor. They've invested capital. They're not necessarily working inside the business. They're just a capital investor. Now imagine this. Imagine you grow that company over the next 5 or 10 or 15 years, and you grow that company to be worth $50 million a year. I'm not talking $50 million in revenue. I'm talking to be worth, as a company, $50 million. Well, what you just did was you traded $100,000 in cash at the startup for half of $50 million. And I'm not very good at math, but that's $25 million. So my suggestion to you is this: if possible, and it's almost always the case, you should bootstrap your freight brokerage or freight agency and not take on outside investors, okay? Outside investors, there's a lot of pros and cons, and I'm not going to dive into it right now. But the reality is, it will ultimately, if you are successful, that one step alone will cost you millions, if not tens of millions of dollars. And there's a whole bunch of other reasons why you may or may not want to add an outside investor. But I can tell you right now, if you're starting a freight brokerage, I would highly frown on that unless you absolutely positively just can't, you've tried getting started and for whatever reason, you really think you need that capital, but you really don't. The reality is you can bootstrap your freight brokerage, and I do think that that's the best way to get started. So listen, those are the 3 big mistakes. Those are the 3 huge mistakes that I made that cost me well over $5 million personally in my pocket. I'm not talking about revenue. I'm talking about $5 million in my pocket. So listen, if you guys have learned from this, hit the like button, comment below with any questions you have. Truly appreciate you guys being here. And if you're looking to get started as a freight broker, right, or a freight agent, and you've been looking for some, You've been looking for a system. You've been looking for an online course. You've been looking for a program that will teach you from A to Z. Check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Trained over 10,000 students, had that program for well over a decade, and we offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money-back guarantee. Okay, cool. Very cool. So let's chat for a minute. Which of those three did kind of hit home with you the most? Which one of those three do you think is the most important to you? Okay. So hit me up in the comments. And then after we jump through this part, we're going to do some Q&A. Hold your questions. I'm just looking for some feedback from the audience. Which of those three do you think was the most important to you, the most relevant to you? The three were, again, hiring, okay, hiring the wrong person, over-optimizing to new customers and not enough on customer development and retention, and number three, bringing on outside investors. Yep. All right, cool. Corey says number two. So he's saying focusing in on too much on customer acquisition versus customer retention and development. Yep. For sure. Andre says bring on outside investors. Scott says number two, focusing too much on new customer development. And listen, like I said, don't get me wrong. As a startup, you need to be over-optimized on new customer acquisition. But as soon as you start getting a small book of customers, you need to make sure that you dedicate time to focusing on enhancing those relationships as opposed to just being transactional and asking them for more business. And again, whenever possible, I highly recommend, strongly suggest that you try to meet them face to face, even if it requires you jumping on a plane or driving a few hours, whatever that case may be. The value of being face to face and having those relationships, it's a game changer. It's a game changer when you do get an opportunity to meet them face to face. So highly recommend that. Brian says number two. Yep. Yeah, and having a capital investor versus just a partner, those are different. They're different, right? Now, there's some similarities and there's some pros and cons. Taking on a partner that's going to work side by side with you in the business is a little bit different than taking an outside investor, but there is some crossover there. So my personal opinion is, unless that person has an established customer base or a lot of experience, or they really fill the gaps and the holes where you're struggling, then I probably wouldn't take on a partner, and I definitely would they would definitely not be an equal partner. Okay. You need to retain control of that company. So, all right, cool. All right. So some good feedback. All right, guys. So again, before we get started here, I just want to talk to you really quick. The Freight Broker Sales Accelerator, my 8-week live freight broker coaching and mentoring program that's geared specifically towards sales and getting shippers. This is not for startups. This is not for people that are just looking to become a broker or just looking to become an agent. If you're already a broker, you're already an agent, or you're about to launch and you've already went through the startup training and you need help with getting shippers and you need help navigating the whole sales process, check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com/FBSA number 2, and you'll see all the details of the program. It's not a free program. It's not a cheap program. But if you think it's something that you need, you can click on that, the link on there. You can schedule a call. We'll do a real quick interview and see if I'm a good fit for you and if you're a good fit for me. And if so, then I'll invite you into the program and we'll get an opportunity to work together. So yeah, before we jumped into Q&A, I just want to share that one more time. So what questions do you guys have? Let's talk about questions. Hit me up in the comments with any questions, whether it be about this training, whether it be about any other topics as it relates to starting or growing a successful freight brokerage. I have about 10 to 15 minutes to do Q&A. So hit me up quick, get your questions in here quick, because chances are there will be more questions than there are time. So hit me up. And if you guys don't have questions, that's cool too. I'll let you guys go about your day. Believe it or not, I actually have my sprinkler guys here that are opening up my sprinklers, and apparently there's a whole bunch of issues, and they're supposed to leave shortly. So I do want to actually talk to them before they leave because I have no idea where they're at in the process. Okay. Sergio, I just did the application for surety bond, got one offer with 25,000 collateral and an annual price of 2570. Also, I did fill out the form for the company you partnered with, waiting on them. Yeah. So Sergio, wait for Jet. Wait for them to get back to you. Number one, I've fully vetted that company. Okay. I trust that company. They're definitely one of the leaders in the space, and they know what they're doing. They're one of the largest bond providers out there. Okay. And they work with startups, which some bond providers don't. And if some of the other providers that do work with startups, they make the barriers to entry a little bit more difficult. I've partnered with Jet. They have a perfect system for freight broker startups. They're as competitive as anybody, right? They're going to be as competitive as anybody. And if they see that you filled that application and came from our community, I promise you, they're going to treat you absolutely fantastic. Okay. Because we have that type of relationship. And they're really excited about being able to work with the students here. We had a bond provider previously that did a great job for many, many years, but they've changed their policies and they're no longer working with startups, at least for the time being. So I developed this relationship, and now we're able to, some of the students are able to get their freight broker bond. Now, just know that no matter what the situation is, if you can't get your freight broker bond, okay, if for whatever reason you just have bad credit or whatever the case may be, become a freight agent. You're absolutely crazy. The upside is huge and the risk is negligible. You can get started as a freight agent for hundreds of dollars, and it doesn't matter what your credit is because you're operating as an independent contractor under a licensed broker. And I personally know agents that make over $1 million a year. Now, I cannot promise you that, but the opportunity is there. Okay. And so what I want you to understand is that, there's a great income opportunity, and you don't have all the risk, and you only have to focus on getting and serving your customers. So it's a lot easier. Plus you get 50 to 70% of the profits. And if you build a book of business and you learn the business from the inside out, and you ever want to pivot and become your own broker later, you just transition your book of business into your own brokerage. So the upside is phenomenal. So if for some reason you can't get your broker bond, don't give up on your dream. Become an agent. Start as an agent. It's the best gig in town. I'm telling you. I'm telling you right now. There's no question. It's the best gig in town. Affordable starting TMS. Okay, piece of cake. Here's what I want you to do. I'm going to share a link with you really quick. Let me find it. Okay, cool. So my friend Tim Hyam is the CEO of Ascend TMS. If you go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/TMS, you'll see all the details. You can sign up for a free trial with no credit card if you go through this link. No credit card. Plus, they have some bonuses they'll give you. All you have to do when you fill this out, your setup, is type in the coupon code FBBC. That lets them know that you came from my community. They're a partner that I established many years ago. I've known Tim for many years. He built his own successful brokerage. He then took the technology that he had developed after he sold the company and developed his own TMS. He is by far one of the most well-known and established TMS providers in the country. And so I highly, highly recommend them. Very cost effective. I mean, I think you get a free trial for absolutely zero. And I think you can act with no credit card, and you can keep that trial for a while, if not permanent. And then you can upgrade to more, more services and more functionality. But I think it's like $99. It's very cost effective. Now, you got to understand, you're talking to a guy who spent over $1 million developing my own TMS. If I had to do it today, I wouldn't develop my own TMS. I'd probably just work with Tim at Ascend. Okay. So freightbrokerbootcamp.com/TMS. If you guys have any interest in the freight broker software, which basically, just so you guys know, the TMS is kind of the heart and soul of a freight brokerage. It's like the workflow management for all of your customer data, all of your carrier data, all of your load data, the workflow from, available to covered to dispatched to delivered. that whole process is managed inside of the TMS. Okay. So hope that makes sense. Good question. Thank you. Okay, Rad Freight Brokerage asks, growing a freight brokerage, how do you respond to shippers saying they have their own trucks? Okay, well, there's a couple of things. Number one, most shippers do not have their own trucks. A very small percentage of shippers, of people that make and distribute product, have their own trucks. Okay? And even if they do have, even if that small percentage has their own trucks, they don't move all the freight on their trucks. All right, so that's number one. Number two, so if you find a shipper that is telling you they have their own trucks, their own in-house fleet, what you want to do is this. You want to peel the onion back a little bit further and ask a couple of questions, because chances are they're moving that customer freight, the end product, to the customer. They want to control the last mile because of quality. So what they've done is they've got a fleet of trucks, and however big that truck's, 5, 10, 15, 20 trucks, those are the trucks that are taking the final product and delivering it to the clients. Now, there's a lot of other freight besides just the last mile. You've got all the inbound freight. Okay. For example, you've got inbound freight for the raw materials. Let's say, for example, you're making this bottle of sparkling ice water. The inbound product that they need to buy and then have to their facility before they can actually make this final product and deliver it is a bottle cap, a label, the liquids, right? The packaging, the cardboard, all the things that go around it. So there's a lot of inbound product that they need. So you can inquire and ask them, how do they handle their inbound? You can also ask them, how do they handle their returns or the rejections, right? In the event that, the product needs to get returned, right? That truck that they sent to deliver it is already gone, but you want to, they need to deliver, they need to return that product. So that's another thing you can look at. So basically the big bucket there is inbound raw material. How are they handling their inbound? Because a lot of times their trucks will handle the outbound, but not the inbound. So that's something you can ask. Hope that helps, Rad. Shane asks, have you moved any government freight? If so, what's your take on it? Yeah, we moved a lot of government freight. We did SDDC, which is basically DOD. And we moved government freight for many, many years. Government freight is like any other freight. It's just a little bit more complicated to get set up with a government entity, whether that be GSA or whether that be FEMA or whether that be SDDC. They make you jump through a few more hoops. Typically, you got to be in business for at least 3 years, right? You got to show record of being in business for at least 3 years. You may or may not have to get an additional bond specific to them. So there are some requirements and hoops you got to jump through. They try to vet a little bit harder than just a typical shipper. And secondly, they have their own freight management system where you enter your bids and your tenders, right? All your bids. That system is very antiquated and can be challenging to understand. It's not like, where you're just doing a rate from, Buffalo to Boston for a van and it's a spot quote. That's super easy, right? The freight management system that they have, doing your tenders and doing your bids is a lot more complicated. So there's a little bit of a barrier there. But overall, the government has a ton of freight. And they go on all types of equipment, flatbeds and vans and refrigerated. They've got all the same product that everybody else buys and consumes, plus all the military stuff. When you think about Department of Defense, you're thinking about tanks and guns and ammo. That's actually probably a small percentage of the freight that they move, okay? Because they've got all the food, they've got all the office equipment, they've got all the computers, they've got everything, right? That it takes to run the military above and beyond just weapons, okay? So there's a lot of government freight out there, but there are a few more hoops to jump through. Hope that helps, Shane. Okay, question from William. I went from doing everything cradle to grave. Now I have a team of 3. What's the best way to structure the brokerage? Okay, so you have your own brokerage. You started out as one broker doing cradle to grave. You were doing everything, wearing all the hats, and now you've got a team of 3. Well, there is no best, but I can tell you the way that I prefer. There's 2 primary ways that you would do it, okay? 2 primary non-complicated ways that you would do it, right? One is you could hire people and train them to become cradle to grave brokers inside your organization, okay? Where they manage it all. Just like you did, they build their own customer database, they move their own freight. And so you just wash, rinse, repeat, and you build a whole group of brokers. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to focus, you be the rainmaker and you be the person that's focused on getting customers, and you build your team around you that's focused on operations. So they're focused on finding trucks, dispatching trucks, posting loads, doing rates, right? And doing the operational stuff while you focus on the sales, and then you're selling into their capacity. So if you've got 3 people that are all very busy and you want to continue to add new customers, you might have to add a 4th at some point. And you build a team of operations people around you. Now, if you get to 4 or 5 or 6 operations people, somebody in that group is probably going to stand out from the rest of the crowd. And then maybe at that point, you promote them to become their own broker, or they become their own salesperson. And then you start hiring capacity into their customers, right? So those are just a couple of ideas, a couple of ways that you can do it as a small brokerage, right? So, without getting into, account managers and, SDRs and all that stuff that gets very complicated and convoluted, I would say the 2 best models are hire and train more cradle to grave brokers, or hire operations people around you to cover the freight, which frees up your time to go out and get new customers. So hope that helps. Good question, William. I'm scrolling, looking for questions here, and we got a couple more minutes. ARCS, what type of material do you think is important to develop as an introduction when asked to send over company information? A couple of the things that you need to develop early on in your brokerage is you need to have a basic website. You need to set up your own LinkedIn profile for you and your business. And you should set up at least a 1-page sales sheet, just a sales sheet that sells what you do and how you do it. Okay. They're probably going to want, at some point, they may want they're going to want some additional details, but really you don't want to overload them with information, right? The bigger the packet is, the more pages, the less likely they are to read it. Okay. So, if you have a shipper setup pack, you're probably going to need a credit application. You're probably going to need an accessorial surcharge sheet that's going to define all your accessorials, and then they can sign off on that. You're going to need some basic stuff, but ultimately don't overdo it. You need a website, you need a LinkedIn profile, and a LinkedIn company profile, both of which are free. And then I would say at least maybe a 1-page sales sheet, 1 or 2 page, which is a kind of a digital version of a sales sheet, right? You don't even need to have a printed version, and then you're off to the races. So I hope that helps. Andrea asked, do you recommend having more than one load board, DAT, truck stop, etc.? Are there specific ones you recommend? I recommend the DAT and truck stop. Those are the 2 biggest ones I recommend. There are other ones out there, direct freight. There are 1, 2, 3 load boards. There's some other ones out there. Truckload, I think, is another one. I mean, there's some load boards out there that are good, but I think the ones who have the largest amount of capacity and the best overall tools are truck stop and DAT. Now, they also charge for it, right? So they're not cheap. If you're on a budget, well, then maybe you want to focus on a little bit different one. We had multiple load boards, but when we first started out, we basically had 2 load boards, DAT and truck stop. Okay. So that's what we built the business on initially, because we had to obviously develop carrier relationships. We had to cover freight. Obviously, the tools are much, much better today than they were when I started my brokerage over 20 years ago. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. Just bring them on to the level of your budget. And then from there, as your company grows, reinvest some of those profits into expanding those tools as needed. Okay, question. I have quotes coming in for containers, but when I ask questions like, is there anything inside the container? That's the value. What's the value? They state that they feel uncomfortable, but aren't those necessary to ask? Okay, well, that's a really good question. I understand why they're apprehensive, because obviously there's been theft and fraud and they're afraid that their product is going to get stolen. If they're just asking you to do quotes, okay, then you don't really need to know what's inside. You're just agreeing to move a container from point A to point B, okay? And it's based on the size of the container, not necessarily what's in the container. Now, if they give you the shipment and you are going to move the load, at that point, you're going to want to know what's in the container, right? And you're going to need to know the weight. You're going to need to know all those sorts of things, right? But with just quoting, you're not going to need to know what's inside there, right? You're probably going to want to know the container, you know, how big the container is, the weight of the container, where it's picking, where it's dropping, and then that's going to be able to give you the basics that you need. I'm assuming you're probably just doing drayage, right? You're probably just doing it from the port or from the rail into the port or out of the port or rail. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. Okay, guys, listen, truly appreciate you guys hanging with me here. I hope this training was valuable. If it was, make sure you hit the like button, share the stream. Totally appreciate it. If you guys need help with freight broker sales, if you need help developing a proven system that will allow you to get 2 to 4 new shippers per month and on your way to 7 figures in sales, check out the Freight Broker Sales Accelerator. There's still some spots available. Again, it will sell out very soon, and I don't know when it will reopen. I hadn't opened it for like 5 months due to some health issues, but typically, you know, it reopens every 3 to 5 months anyways. So yeah, get involved, check the information out. Maybe we'll have an opportunity to chat and work together. All right. Guys, have an awesome day. Have an awesome week. Hold on. All right. I got one more question, then I'm going to go. Would you sign a non-compete offer? Was 50-50 broker pays everything, including back office support, but have to sign non-compete? I can take customers with me when I leave, but can't work with his. Well, it's not a non-compete then. Okay. If he's saying that you can't back solicit his customers, the reality is you don't even know who his customers are. So he shouldn't even share his customers with you. The problem with signing something like that is the fact that you don't know who his customers are, and you might end up violating the agreement later without even knowing, right? What's he going to do? Give you a whole list of his customers? That would be stupid. So you just tell him, don't share with me your customers, and I can't solicit them because you're not giving me any information. But you don't want to put yourself in violation of an agreement that you're not going to back solicit his customers when you don't even know who his customers are. It's a flawed concept. It's a waste. This person obviously doesn't know what they're talking about, right? So it sounds good on paper, but be very, very careful, right? Even though you can port your own customers, you could put yourself in breach. Hope that helps. All right, guys, listen, have an awesome day. Have an awesome week. I will see you next Monday on the next Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. If you guys want to check out the Freight Broker Sales Accelerator, there's the link. Again, thank you for being here. Have an awesome week, and I'll see you next week on the next Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. Thanks all.